Chapter 51 Myrrh, Wait for Infection. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wang Min and the others were livid with rage. You, Fang Yuqing, were the one who egged us on to attack Zhang Yi's place in the first place. Wang Min said. And now, after we're all beat up and bleeding, you want to ditch us and live the good life by yourself? No way, not even Zhou Peng, who was in the middle of surgery, flew into a rage when he heard Fang Yuqing was going after Zhang Yi. Yuqing, how could you do this to me? Didn't you always say you hated Zhang Yi? Zhou Peng asked. Remember what you said, about wanting to be my girl. Wang Min slapped Fang Yuqing hard. She covered her stinging face but stubbornly spat back, what's wrong with wanting to find my own happiness? Being with you guys is just a dead end. Sooner or later, we'll all run out of supplies and just die. Zhang Yi's place is comfortable. He's got food, drinks, and a warm fire. What's wrong with me going there? She looked at Zhou Peng with a pained expression, as if pleading for understanding. Zhou Peng, you're a good guy. You've always been so good to me, Fang Yuqing said. But if you love someone, you want them to be happy, right? You've helped me in the past, sure, but you shouldn't hold me back from a better life. Can you give me the kind of life Zhang Yi can? Zhou Peng's face was ghostly pale. He floundered, unable to argue. Zhou Ke frowned. Don't move. You'll hit an artery and bleed out. Wang Min panicked and rushed over to hold Zhou Peng down. Cousin, don't get worked up over this witch. Save your strength. She took a deep breath, glaring at Fang Yuqing. Look, Fang Yuqing, we won't stop you from leaving, but only if Zhang Yi comes here and swaps places with you. Lin Caning blocked the door, holding her head high. Yeah, Fang Yuqing, if you're going, we're all going with you. Fang Yuqing glared at them bitterly, then said to Zhang Yi, Brother Zhang Yi, you hear that? They won't let me go. Can't you just give them some medicine or something? Zhang Yi, who had been watching from the kitchen, chuckled, hearing Fang Yuqing's words. He smiled and said, that medicine's too valuable to just hand over. How do I know they're not lying? They might just be using you. They might hold you hostage, use you to blackmail me, and keep demanding more stuff. Zhang Yi said. Qing'er, we can't fall for that. Since the speaker was on, everyone heard the conversation. Zhou Peng shouted, Yuqing, don't listen to him. He's just using you. Everyone could see it, except her, but when you're desperate, your mind doesn't always work the way it should. And Fang Yuqing was desperate. Zhang Yi offered her a glimmer of hope, and she clung to it like a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline, even knowing, deep down, it wouldn't save her. She couldn't let go. She nodded furiously. Yes, brother Zhang Yi, you're right. Then she charged at Lin Caning, who was blocking the door. Get out of my way, you skank. Just get out of my way. The two women started clawing at each other, desperate to get to Zhang Yi's. Fang Yuqing had snapped. Her eyes were bloodshot. She tore at Lin Caning's hair and bit her arm. Lin Caning screamed in pain and fought back with equal fury. They fell to the ground, two crazed women. Wang Min couldn't stand it. There were still patients on the operating table, and the fighting could mess up the surgery. She jumped into the fray. Together, she and Lin Caning managed to subdue Fang Yuqing. Let me go. Let me go. Get off me. Fang Yuqing screamed hoarsely, like a madwoman. Wang Min frowned and slapped Fang Yuqing across the face. Again and again, Fang Yuqing was stunned into silence. Wang Min sneered. You want to leave? Dream on. She grabbed Fang Yuqing's phone, walked to the side, and called Zhang Yi. Hey, Zhang Yi. We've got Fang Yuqing. If you really want to save her, you can trade her for medicine. Zhang Yi shrugged. Too many of you. It's a trap. What if you kill me? Zhang Yi asked. So, Yuqing, as much as I want us to be together, they won't let us. Don't blame me. Zhang Yi made sure to speak loudly. Fang Yuqing heard every word. She screamed in pain, glaring at Wang Min and the others. Zhang Yi hung up with a sly grin. The cruelest thing in the world is to give someone a glimmer of hope, and then snatch it away. he wasn't about to let that green tea goddess into his house, but he definitely wanted to mess with their heads. At worst, they just kill Fang Yuqing, good riddance. Fang Yuqing wailed for a long time, finally breaking down in tears of frustration, but she didn't hate Zhang Yi. She hated Zhou Peng, Wang Min, and the others. If not for them, she'd be at Zhang Yi's place right now, eating fancy food by a warm fire. Wang Min scoffed at Fang Yuqing's outburst. She glanced at Lin Caning, pleased with how she'd handled herself. At least she hadn't sided with Fang Yuqing. See? This woman only thinks about herself. If you want to stay with us, keep an eye on her. Don't let her run off, Wang Min said to Lin Caning coldly. Lin Caning nodded eagerly. Sister Wang, I'll do whatever you say. She glared at Fang Yuqing, crying on the floor, and said, I won't let her escape alone. If we're going to suffer, we'll all suffer together. Why should she get to live it up by herself? Inside, Zhou Ke was doing her best to treat the injured. With no way to disinfect anything, the rusty crossbow bolts had to be ripped out as quickly as possible, then bandaged to stop the bleeding. Unfortunately, there were no sterile cotton balls, and the rubbing alcohol was frozen solid. The only good thing was that the extreme cold had numbed them, so they didn't feel much. But the cold had its downsides too. With this temperature, the infected parts of their bodies would quickly begin to die. Zhou Ke wiped the blood from her hands. She closed her medical kit and said to Wang Min and the others, this is just temporary. Without proper medicine, they're likely to get infections. Be prepared. Wang Min's eyes were filled with despair. Zhang Yi wouldn't give them the time of day. How were they supposed to get medicine? Chapter 52. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Ke held out her hand to Wang Min. Of course, she wasn't doing it for free. Wang Min knew the drill, pulling out a pack of cookies and handing them over. Not much, but enough to ration for a couple of days. Zhou Ke seemed satisfied and left. After she was gone, the room felt even heavier. The pain from their wounds still throbbed, keeping the three men huddled under a quilt on the sofa, too miserable to move. Zhou Peng stared at Fang Yuqing on the floor, his eyes full of heartache. The others just glared at her. Sun Jichao took a deep breath. We can't just sit here and die. We need to get medicine from Zhang Yi. If these wounds get infected, we're all goners. He looked at Wang Min and Lin Caning, his voice serious. You two need to understand, surviving in this new world is a whole lot harder without a man to protect you. Wang Min and Lin Caning looked grim. They knew Sun Jichao was right. It's why Wang Min had even bothered to team up with them in the first place. But, we don't have anything to bargain with Zhang Yi. Wang Min sighed, looking defeated. If they couldn't overpower him, what else could they do now that they were weaker? Sun Jichao gritted his teeth, the pain pushing him to the edge. I have an idea. It's worth a shot. Everyone's eyes lit up, turning to him. An idea? If there's a chance, we have to try it. Yeah, just waiting around is a death sentence. What do we have to lose? Sun Jichao went on. Zhang Yi has a fireplace, which means he's got a ton of fuel. And from his videos, he's got plenty of food too. Right now, only a few of us know this. But we're in no shape to take on Zhang Yi ourselves. So, we leak this information. Let everyone in the building know. Sun Jichao's eyes turned cold, like a snake ready to strike. We can't handle him alone, but what about hundreds of people? And don't forget that psycho Qin Zhenghao has a gun. Those guys are capable of anything. They'd kill someone without a second thought. They'll definitely go after Zhang Yi. All we need is some medicine and food from the aftermath. That shouldn't be a problem. Gu Jiaoyang jumped in, excited. That's a great plan. I'm in. The others quickly agreed. They didn't exactly have a better option. Fang Yuqing suddenly screamed, you guys are unbelievable. How can you do this? I want to be with Zhang Yi. If you ruin him, what am I supposed to do? Wang Min's face hardened. She slapped Fang Yuqing hard, leaving her face swollen and bruised. Grabbing her hair, Wang Min dragged her towards the bedroom while she screamed. Then, Wang Min yelled at Zhou Peng, "Zhou Peng, get in here. Do me a favor." Zhou Peng's arm was injured, but not too badly. Zhang Yi hadn't aimed to kill, just to cause an infection, so, Zhou Peng, after removing the arrow, could still move around. Zhou Peng was stunned. "Cousin, are you sure? I really like her. I can't hurt her." Fang Yuqing, trembling, pleaded for mercy from the bed. "No, you can't do this to me. Zhou Peng, didn't you say you loved me?" Wang Min spat, disgusted. "You little witch. You've caused us so much trouble. Letting you sleep with my cousin is a blessing." Turning to Zhou Peng, she said, "Don't be a fool. This kind of woman is trouble. Who knows how many guys she's been with? Let's be honest, you just want to sleep with her, right? Well, here's your chance to get it out of your system. See if she tries to fool you after this." She knew how to manipulate Fang Yuqing. If Zhou Peng slept with her, he wouldn't be so infatuated. Zhou Peng roared and charged into the bedroom, shoving Wang Min aside. "Don't talk about her like that. Yuqing and I are in love. I would never force her." Zhou Peng stuck out his neck and shouted. Wang Min stared, pointing at Zhou Peng, too angry to speak. "You spineless simp." She had underestimated his devotion. Zhou Peng countered, "I'm not a simp. Yuqing has been good to me. I know, given time, she'll fall in love with me." Zhou Peng turned and gave Fang Yuqing a goofy smile. "Don't worry, I'm here." He remembered arriving in the city, young and naive, with only a basic education. Most people looked down on him. Only Fang Yuqing had offered a kind smile, asking him to help remove something when he was lonely. Fang Yuqing had let him take her to dinner. The feeling of being trusted had always warmed his heart. He'd rather hurt himself than hurt Fang Yuqing. Even after what she'd just said, he still thought it was Zhang Yi's fault. Fang Yuqing had been manipulated. That's right, if he was patient, Fang Yuqing would realize he was the right man for her. Seeing Zhou Peng's idiotic smile, Fang Yuqing sighed in relief. Letting him sleep with her wasn't ideal. Fang Yuqing still felt disgusted by this guy. The others were speechless at Zhou Peng's behavior, but their focus was on uniting the entire building to deal with Zhang Yi, so, they didn't care about Zhou Peng. Wang Min and the others decided to leak the news about Zhang Yi's supplies to everyone. With the help of the whole building, they could break into Zhang Yi's place. Only then could they get the medicine and save Sun Jichao's life. Wang Min uploaded Zhang Yi's old videos and photos to the building's group chat. She posted them there specifically for Chen Zhenghao to see. Wang Min wrote, "Neighbors, did you know that people are still living it up while the rest of us suffer? That kind of selfishness is disgusting. This video was taken at Zhang Yi's place recently. Think about the lives we're living, compared to his. Is that fair? Let's talk about what we should do about this." Normally, the group chat was silent. Only Chen Zhenghao threatened people there occasionally, so, Wang Min's post with videos and pictures instantly grabbed everyone's attention. People clicked to watch the video. Seeing the comfortable lives, everyone was stunned. Pajamas inside. Our place is freezing. How are they staying warm? They have lights on at night. Where is he getting electricity? Is this really recent? Or is it old footage? Some people were suspicious. Everyone was struggling with hunger and cold. It was impossible to believe that someone was eating hot food and living comfortably. Chapter 53. The neighbors crazy begged Zhang Yi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Wang Min jumped in. I can vouch for it. Those videos? All recent. Zhang Yi's family is sitting pretty with all their supplies, food, fuel, the works. He's living like a king. Lin Caning chimed in, totally. I saw him at the supermarket. I even helped him out. Remember how much stuff they were hauling back then? Seriously, Lin Caning's words jogged everyone's memory. Yeah, Zhang Yi's family had cars coming and going every day. What was he even doing? Think he knew this storm was coming? That's low. He couldn't even give us a heads up. Zhang Yi's a real piece of work. How could he be so heartless? We're neighbors, for crying out loud. We've lived here for years. So selfish. Righteous anger filled the air. They blamed Zhang Yi for all their suffering. It didn't cross their minds that even if Zhang Yi had warned them about the end of the world, they probably wouldn't have believed him anyway. Nope, they just felt like Zhang Yi owed them something. Someone piped up, Zhang Yi needs to be held accountable for this. Yeah. Why should we be freezing and starving while he's living the good life? He's got tons of food, drinks, medicine, fuel. We deserve a share. He needs to step up and take responsibility. That the neighbors were seeing red, they couldn't handle it. If everyone was miserable, fine, but why were they struggling to survive while he was living the high life? No way. If they were going down, he was going down with them. Chen Zhenghao and the others saw the video in the group too. Chen Zhenghao's face flushed. Zhang Yi, you son of a bitch. You're living it up. Zhang Yi was the reason one of Chen Zhenghao's legs was useless. He was the one in the whole building who truly hated Zhang Yi. He hadn't gone after Zhang Yi's family again because it was too damn hard to get through their defenses. He'd already taken a beating trying. Plus, he had no clue they had that much stuff. If he had known, he would have kept trying to get into Zhang Yi's place. No matter what, the group chat blew up instantly. Hundreds of messages flying by. Everyone was talking about Zhang Yi, demanding an explanation. At Zhang Yi, we're freezing and starving here. You've got so much food and fuel to burn in your fireplace. Share the wealth. That's right. We'll remember your kindness. Don't be a jerk. Zhang Yi, we've been neighbors for years. You can't just leave us hanging. Zhang Yi, it's your Aunt Wang from the 20th floor. I lent you 2 green onions once. We're practically family. You gotta give us some supplies. Bro, Zhang, it's your boy Lu Wenxiang, we're like brothers. Why won't you let me stay with you? It's dangerous out here, I'll protect you. Moral blackmail, begging, appeals to reason, all kinds of people came out of the woodwork, all with the same message. Zhang Yi needed to empty his house and give them everything. The notifications kept popping up. Zhang Yi was watching it all unfold. Everyone in the group wanted him to share, but he just watched with a cold eye, not saying a word. He wanted to see how desperate these people would get. Aunt Lin, Zhang Yi, I'm the head of the neighborhood committee. Yeah, right. Hilarious. And I'm the oldest resident in this building. What I say goes. When the supplies come, I'll make sure everyone gets their fair share. Mama Xiaolime, Zhang Yi, my baby, and I are starving. You used to say he was so cute. Help us. I'll let him call you Godfather. Even, if you want anything else, that's fine too. Su Hao, the rich kid, Zhang Yi, if you let me stay at your place, I'll give you everything I own. Hell, my dad's dead, you can have our whole family's billions. Zhang Yi watched the show for a while before slowly typing one word. Oh, that one word sent everyone into a frenzy. The moral blackmailers kept blackmailing, the beggars kept begging. After a while, Zhang Yi asked casually, do I even know you people? Why would I share my family's stuff with you? At this point, everyone was on the verge of losing it. There was no point in reasoning with them. If it meant survival, they'd throw their morals out the window in a heartbeat. Zhang Yi knew that. He had no intention of reasoning with these people. This was just a game to him. His eyes gleamed with a bit of cruelty. These desperate neighbors reminded him of his past life. He had opened his door out of the goodness of his heart and they had come in and hacked him with an axe. Then, while he was still alive, they couldn't wait to tear him apart and eat him. He wanted revenge. That's why he wanted to play with these pathetic, hateful bugs to his heart's content. Someone in the group got impatient. Zhang Yi, are you even human? We've been neighbors for years, shouldn't we help each other out? What's the point of living alone? Young people these days only think about kicking back. You need to learn to give back. If you hadn't kept the news to yourself and hoarded all the supplies, we wouldn't be in this mess. Yeah, everyone's suffering because of you. You need to make it right. Zhang Yi, oh. So, below, a torrent of begging, threats, and curses. They were like shipwreck survivors in the frigid Arctic Ocean. surrounded by sharks, but then they spotted a small fishing boat nearby. The boatmen were eating hot pot, singing songs, and casually sailing past, so they swam desperately, trying to get the boatmen to pull them aboard. The more they teetered between despair and hope, the easier it was for them to crack, and the uglier they became. Zhang Yi watched their twisted faces, smiled, and pulled a bottle of top-shelf Australian yellowtail Shiraz from his temperature-controlled wine cabinet in his dimension and grabbed some premium French foie gras. Red wine and foie gras were a match made in heaven. The bitterness of the foie gras and the tannins of the red wine balanced each other perfectly. It allowed even people unfamiliar with the taste of red wine to appreciate its deliciousness. As he ate foie gras and drank red wine, Zhang Yi enjoyed the wonderful performances of his neighbors. People were sending him private messages and voice calls too. Zhang Yi opened them one by one with great interest. Mama Xiaolime, Zhang Yi, please save me and my baby. If you let me stay at your place, I'll do anything you want. Female college student Zhang Siyu, brother Zhang Yi, I'm too young to die. I'll do anything. Just give me something to eat. A lot of the female residents were sending private messages, many of whom were married. They understood the current market and knew money wouldn't impress Zhang Yi, so they all offered their bodies in exchange for his protection, or at least some food. Chapter 54 Zhou Ku #039, or You are listening at novelfull.audio. What was Zhang Yi's take on all the messages from those women in the building? He just scrolled through a few of the more interesting posts and ignored the rest. Okay, a couple were bold enough to send Zhang Yi private selfies. He glanced at them, but wasn't exactly blown away. Honestly, these women were way too confident. A few were decent looking, but most were just average. They weren't like those girls on TikTok who'd practice their moves, so they weren't even worth a second look, and they thought this was a test for men. Please, as for the guys in the building, they were even more predictable. Suddenly, it was all Big Brother this and Big Brother that, begging Zhang Yi for help. Then there were the old dudes trying to guilt-trip him into taking care of them, and the worst. Some guy came out of the closet and hit on him. Zhang Yi didn't even want to talk about it. After a while, Zhang Yi got bored with the whole thing. He set up his phone in a holder, hoping some new drama would pop up. Then he kicked back on the sofa, sipping red wine, eating foie gras, and enjoying the snow falling outside the window. It had been snowing for about 2 weeks now, and the whole city was buried. Zhang Yi remembered that after a month, the snow would cover everything below the 4th floor. How long it would last? No clue. Honestly, there was no real reason for him to go outside. People went out to find hope, but nobody knew where to find it, except Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi propped his chin up and said to himself, getting pretty boring cooped up in here. Maybe I should head out sometime. Once most of the people in the building had kicked the bucket, then he could take a stroll. Zhang Yi thought for a minute and remembered the snowmobiles he had in his warehouse. He'd originally planned to ship them to a nearby city for an indoor ski resort. That meant even if the snow was 30 feet deep, he'd still be able to get around. I can't exactly leave this room right now, but knowing I have a way to get out and have some fun, that's cool. Zhang Yi was feeling it. He was bored at home all the time, so it would be nice to get out and relax. With his pro-grade Arctic gear and this snowmobile, he could handle sub-zero temperatures no problem. Zhang Yi went back to scrolling through the neighbors' posts. One person in particular caught his attention. Zhou Ku wasn't begging for sympathy or sending selfies, but calmly asking for a trade. Mr. Zhang, we're running low on food and medicine. I'm hoping you can help. In return, I can offer my medical expertise in the future. Zhou Ku, her image popped into Zhang Yi's head, a 26-year-old doctor from Tianhai City's Second People's Hospital, slender and tall, at least 5'9". Zhang Yi remembered her cool, professional face, but even more so her impressive bust size, a 36D, especially when she wore a black sweater in winter. Zhang Yi couldn't help but stare when they rode the elevator together. Of course, a doctor would be sensible. Not begging for handouts, but offering something in return. Zhang Yi liked her style. In the apocalypse, you had to earn your place, and Zhou Ku was offering a valuable skill, her medical expertise. After all, you don't just walk into the top public hospital in Tianhai City without being good. Medical skills were super important now. Zhang Yi had stocked up on medicine, but he was also trying to learn as much as he could about medical stuff. But he wasn't arrogant enough to think he could handle everything. Having a doctor around would be a huge advantage. Plus, Zhang Yi had a good read on Zhou Ke's character. She died in his past life because she gave her food to Lianhua. Whether she was completely desperate or just genuinely kind, Zhang Yi saw something decent in her. Zhang Yi leaned back, propped his chin up, and said to himself, maybe I should bring her in to take care of me, and my little buddy. I mean, I'm living pretty well, but down there is having a rough time. It's a problem. Zhang Yi was a healthy young dude and wasn't going to pretend otherwise. Besides, in a world without rules, there was no point in being uptight. You had to be honest about what you wanted. Haha. Zhang Yi suddenly started laughing. He slapped the armrest and said, I'm touched, I really am. But too bad. He looked up at the ceiling and said, I'm too scared to die. Zhou Ke might be a good option, but unless I have 100% control over her, I can't let her in. Hey, let's wait and see. There will be other survivors. I've got everything I could want. What's the rush in finding a decent doctor and a good woman? Zhang Yi had a plan. He definitely had a death wish. He messaged Zhou Ke, I'm in good shape and don't need a doctor right now. But I do have plenty of food and medicine. If you want to trade, you'll have to offer me something useful now. No matter how talented or beautiful, she wasn't getting anything for free. Zhang Yi wasn't running a charity. There was a long pause before Zhou Ke replied. Can I just treat it as an upfront payment for future consultations? I'm really struggling. Zhou Ke sounded hesitant and embarrassed. She clearly didn't want to beg some random guy for help unless she absolutely had to. Zhang Yi thought for a moment and said, I can give you food and medicine. But you have to do something for me in return. What do you need? Zhou Ke asked. Zhang Yi said, these neighbors are probably going to come after me. If you hear anything about their plans, let me know. Zhang Yi knew his crazy neighbors would eventually try to raid his apartment, but he wasn't worried. He'd spent a fortune building this steel fortress, hand-picking every feature. It was all for this moment. His home was basically a miniature war fortress. Even armed soldiers would have trouble breaking in without heavy weapons, let alone this group of half-dead neighbors who'd been starving and freezing for 2 weeks. He was making this offer to give Zhou Ke an excuse to cooperate, and having an insider would provide an extra layer of security, giving him a heads up. Chapter 55. The neighbors want to knife Zhang Yi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a long pause, Zhou Ke finally agreed. She couldn't bring herself to be that low, but she figured what the neighbors were doing, trying to rob Zhang Yi out of jealousy, was even worse, so she decided to help him. Zhang Yi said, alright, let's see what intel you've got first, and then you get what you want. It's all on you now. Okay, I understand, Zhou Ke replied. She wasn't stupid enough to expect Zhang Yi to help her for nothing, and that was that. Zhang Yi glanced at the group chat. It was blowing up with 99+ notifications, people still tagging him, trying to guilt-trip him. Zhang Yi, where the hell are you? Are you going to hand over those supplies or not? Someone was losing their patience. Zhang Yi smirked. Sounded like they were already planning a raid. Go choke on one. He typed back with a grin. The group exploded with insults, a whole string of dirty words. Zhang Yi didn't care. Bring it on. He'd already killed once and felt nothing, so he wouldn't hesitate to do it again. Fine, Zhang Yi, you asked for this. Don't say we didn't give you a chance, you selfish jerk. From now on, you're on your own. The insults started to die down. No doubt they bailed on the group chat and started a private one, just like they did with Chen Zhenghao plotting how to storm his place. Zhang Yi took a deep breath, a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling up inside him. He was practically shaking. Even knowing his apartment was a fortress, it was still nerve-wracking thinking about facing an attack from 100 people, but that excitement lit a fire in his belly. He'd been itching to teach these greedy bastards a lesson. A glint sparked in his eyes, and his weapons materialized in the living room. 5 high-quality steel crossbows, 3 advanced composite bows, over 290 crossbow bolts, and 300 arrows. Along with 2 iron crates and steel poles, machete. a 4-foot crowbar, baseball bat, hunting knife, all laid out on the table, perfect tools for the job. Besides those, he had bear mace, stun batons, gasoline, a bunch of chemicals, and dozens of Molotov cocktails he'd rigged up with wine bottles, rags, and gas. A cold light flashed in Zhang Yi's eyes. Bring them on, every last one of them. Just like Zhang Yi predicted, the neighbors were furious that he wouldn't hand over his supplies. Sun Jichao made a new group chat, inviting everyone except Zhang Yi. They even pulled in Chen Zhenghao. Seeing Chen Zhenghao's name made some people uneasy, but Chen Zhenghao spoke up, "Alright everyone, our priority is taking down Zhang Yi. His family's got more supplies than all of us combined. Once he's out of the picture, we can split it all up. So relax, I'm not going after anyone else right now. But for this operation, I want half of the supplies we get." Chen Zhenghao had learned the hard way that Zhang Yi's place was heavily fortified and he had crossbows, so, he was planning on using the whole building as cannon fodder. He figured 100+ people could break through Zhang Yi's defenses, no problem. How many weapons could Zhang Yi even have? How many people could he shoot? There were over 100 people in the building, and Chen Zhenghao and his crew of 6 were asking for half the loot. But nobody thought it was unfair. They thought Chen Zhenghao was a good guy. He's got a gun, but he's willing to share half with us. What a guy. Sun Jichao chimed in, "Yeah, let's forget about whatever happened before. Our main goal is to bust into Zhang Yi's place and get back what belongs to all of us." They were leading the charge, and the rest followed right along. Seeing how well Zhang Yi's family was living, their jealousy was boiling over. They wanted to kill Zhang Yi and steal his life for themselves. Knives out, follow me. Let's kill Zhang Yi and grab his stuff. Let's get that shameless, selfish bastard. The mob roared, ready to roll. A few people stayed quiet, like Uncle Yu and Zhou Qi, but most people, even those who were friendly with Zhang Yi or who he'd helped out in the past, had forgotten all about it. Nothing was more important than staying alive. To survive, they'd throw ethics and morals right out the window. Back at his place, Zhang Yi was cleaning his crossbow. He was familiar with these things, used to use them at the shooting range, and in the month leading up to the apocalypse, he'd upped his training. Hitting a target at close range was no problem. Just then, Zhou Qi sent him a message. "They're coming to your place." Zhang Yi read it and replied, "Yeah, I know." Sitting on her couch, Zhou Qi frowned at his calm reply. She pulled the 2 layers of blankets tighter around herself, tucking her bare feet underneath. "They've gone door to door. They saw your video and lost it. Don't you want to think of something?" Zhou Qi thought the smart thing would be to hand over some of the supplies and calm everyone down. Otherwise, no matter how tough someone was, they couldn't take on that many people. 100+ people could tear down a house pretty easily. Zhang Yi just smiled, not saying much. He just said, "Remember, stay away this time. I'm only saying this once. Then, just sit back and watch the show." Zhou Qi frowned, her eyes full of curiosity. She couldn't figure out where Zhang Yi got the confidence to take on 100 people by himself. This wasn't a game. Once they broke into his apartment, those crazed people would kill him for sure. Could he be a psycho? Zhou Qi muttered to herself, but it was Zhang Yi's choice, nothing she could do about it. Still, she did what he said and didn't join the mob heading for his apartment. She had her limits and wasn't going to feed off anyone else's misery, whether it was Zhang Yi's or the other neighbors. Chapter 56. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhang Yi waited at home, a grim expression on his face, surrounded by weapons, for his crazy neighbors to show up. Then he got a message from Uncle Yu, the security guard. "Zhang, get out of there. They're coming for you, and they've brought backup." Zhang Yi felt a warmth in his heart. It was rare to find good people in this world. He smiled and replied, "Don't worry, Uncle Yu, I've got this." Uncle Yu paused, realizing there was nowhere to run. Resistance was the only option. "Zhang," he said, "I hope you make it. I'm sorry, but this time, I don't think I can help you." Uncle Yu felt ashamed. He'd accepted Zhang Yi's generosity, stocking up on instant noodles, ham, and other supplies when Zhang Yi suggested it. things were okay for him now, but seeing Zhang Yi about to be overrun by so many people, he felt helpless. Zhang Yi said casually, the fact that you're not joining them is enough. Don't worry about me. Uncle Yu was making the right call. If he tried to help Zhang Yi now, the other 100+ residents would tear him apart. After a brief chat, Zhang Yi was careful not to reveal any details about his family, better safe than sorry. He wasn't about to fully trust anyone, no matter who they were. Soon after, Zhang Yi felt a slight tremor under his feet. A rumbling sound came from outside. Here they come, Zhang Yi said quietly. It was the sound of hundreds of people charging up the stairs, but Zhang Yi lived on the 24th floor. The elevator was out, so these suckers were going to be winded. Of course, it wasn't just the people downstairs. Using the building's surveillance system, Zhang Yi saw his next-door neighbors from apartment 2402 come out armed with a kitchen knife and a wrench. It was a young couple. The woman hid behind the man, kitchen knife in hand. They both had a hungry look in their eyes, staring intently at Zhang Yi's door. They must be green with envy, knowing their neighbor had been living the high life for the past couple of weeks. The crowd arrived, blocking the hallway outside Zhang Yi's apartment. Some people held umbrellas over their heads, trying to prevent Zhang Yi from pouring cold water on them. Before long, someone started banging on the door. Boom! 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 Zhang Yi, get out here. This is your last chance. Don't make us come in there, or it's gonna be too late. Zhang Yi checked the monitors. He didn't see Sun Jichao or the others, let alone Chen Zhenghao. The way these people were banging on the door confirmed his suspicions. Sun Jichao, Chen Zhenghao, and the others hadn't told them the truth about his apartment. In other words, they were using the other neighbors as cannon fodder, hoping they'd take the brunt of Zhang Yi's crossbow bolts and high-voltage attacks. Zhang Yi wasn't about to be polite. He had plenty of power, so what the hell? He hit the high-voltage switch. The guy who'd been angrily smashing the door was instantly jolted by the current, his face twisting in pain. Worse yet, the hallway was packed with over 100 people, so when the guy got shocked, the electricity arced through a good chunk of the crowd behind him. High voltage. Get back! The people in the back scrambled, desperate to get away. If they weren't wearing so many layers of clothes, they would have been toast. Everyone was stunned by the electricity, their muscles spasming. The guy who was knocking and the 7 or 8 people closest to him got it the worst. They couldn't escape and ended up charred black. The others stared in horror, nobody daring to help. After 10 seconds, Zhang Yi cut the power. Green smoke rose from the 9 bodies, and the air filled with the smell of barbecue and burnt clothes. Thump! The 9 people collapsed to the ground, blackened and still. Everyone knew that even if they were still alive, they were as good as dead. Eyes wide, they stared at the scene in front of them, horrified. They hadn't expected so many to die. Right in front of them, the dead were frozen in agony, eyes wide open. Several women in the crowd couldn't take it anymore. They screamed, bent over, and started throwing up. They didn't have anything in their stomachs, so they were just dry heaving. Some people panicked and tried to run, but when they reached the stairs, they found Chen Zhenghao and his goons blocking the way. What do you think you're doing? Get back in there, Chen Zhenghao said menacingly, gun in hand. The hallway was their only escape route. Chen Zhenghao was blocking it to force everyone to fight Zhang Yi. The more dead, the better. Then Chen Zhenghao could steal their supplies. Sun Jichao and a few others dragged themselves to the front. They looked at the 9 corpses without a flicker of emotion. They clearly had the same plan as Chen Zhenghao. Sun Jichao saw the fear in everyone's eyes and yelled, that damn Zhang Yi. He's a monster. Killing his own neighbors. Brothers and sisters, we have to kill Zhang Yi and avenge them. Don't be afraid. Use wood to hit the door, just don't touch the metal. He's running out of tricks. He's at the end of his rope. Break down that door, and there's a warm stove waiting for us, and all the food we can eat. Sun Jichao's pep talk had some people seeing red. They'd been living in the cold and starving for weeks. They'd do anything for a bite of food and a little warmth. Someone grabbed a piece of wood, probably ripped from a wardrobe or bed frame. All right, let's do this. Open that door and kill that bastard Zhang Yi. A group of people grabbed the wood, aimed at Zhang Yi's door, and started smashing. Boom. 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 The force of the impacts made the glasses on Zhang Yi's coffee table rattle. Zhang Yi decided to have some fun. He pulled a big Sennheiser speaker from his stash, plugged in his phone, and blasted his favorite song. Outside, people were pounding on the door, but inside, a classic happy song was playing, which only enraged them even more. Zhang Yi, you arrogant bastard. I'm going to kill you. You're gonna die today. You're gonna pay for my brother's life. They slammed the wood harder and harder, but after dozens of hits, the door hadn't budged. Over a dozen adults were putting their backs into it, generating thousands of pounds of force. All they'd managed to do was leave a few white marks and some barely visible dents on the thick black metal door. The neighbors' spirits began to sink. What kind of door is this? Why is it so strong? At this rate, we'll never break it down. Everyone was out of breath. They were working in temperatures below zero, and they didn't have much strength to begin with because they hadn't been eating enough. Some people's legs started to give out, and they had to rotate, but at the current rate, they'd all be dead from exhaustion long before they broke down the door. Then someone walked over, stared at the door for a minute, and exclaimed, That's a bank vault security door. The guy worked at a bank, and he recognized it right away. When the others heard that, they lost all hope. You mean we can't break it? The bank employee shook his head. You could use bombs on this thing and it wouldn't open. Without a key, only the world's best lockpickers have a chance. Just then, Zhang Yi raised his crossbow and took aim at the peephole. Chapter 57. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Looking at the neighbors still outside, arguing about what to do, Zhang Yi didn't bother aiming this time. They were just neighbors, nothing special. Killing them was no big deal, because he was shooting indiscriminately. Zhang Yi's hand speed increased. He quickly reloaded the crossbow with one hand and fired. Thwack, starred at a sharp sound ripped through the air, followed by a scream. A man clutched his neck, his eyes wide with horror, as he slowly crumpled to the ground. Everyone stared. A rusty crossbow bolt protruded from his neck. He's got a weapon. Watch out! Someone yelled. People panicked and tried to scatter. But the hallway was cramped, packed with residents from hundreds of apartments. There wasn't room to run. Fear turned into desperation, and people tripped over each other in a chaotic heap. Zhang Yi didn't care. He just kept loading and shooting. A professional hand crossbow, combined with tetanus-laced bolts, left almost no chance of survival. Thwack, ****thwack, ****thwack, each sharp, piercing sound felt like a death knell, filling the neighbors with dread. Screams echoed as people were hit, bleeding and collapsing on the spot. The rest were terrified, desperately shoving their way towards the stairwell. Some fell and were trampled before they could get up. Screams were everywhere. Chen Zhenghao stood in front of the stairs, gun in hand, aiming at anyone who tried to escape. What are you scared of? He's just one guy. Get in there. Chen Zhenghao's icy stare and the black barrel of his gun kept the crowd from fleeing. He wanted to use them as cannon fodder to wear down Zhang Yi's defenses. He couldn't let them run. Sun Jichao and the others had kept their distance, hoping to survive, and hadn't been hit. Zhang Yi fired dozens of bolts. In such a confined, crowded space, nearly every shot hit its mark. That meant at least dozens of people were about to die. But people are resourceful when cornered. Someone spotted the shooting hole. He's shooting through a hole in the door. Block it. Immediately, people raised mops and brooms, jamming them into the holes above the door. Some tried to throw things into Zhang Yi's apartment. Zhang Yi calmly retreated, closing and locking the iron door behind the shooting hole. It could only be opened from the inside. Impenetrable, but he'd just taken out dozens of potential threats. Seeing that Zhang Yi could no longer shoot, the neighbors began to recover from their panic. The ground was a mess. Many had been hit by bolts, with injuries of varying severity. 3 had been struck in the neck or head and died instantly. But when the neighbors saw the rusty tetanus arrows, their hearts sank. Anyone hit was unlikely to survive. Some, having lost loved ones, cursed Zhang Yi, crying bitterly. Zhang Yi, you bloody bastard! You're a coward. Come out here. Come out if you've got the guts. I'll take you on, one-on-one. You murderer. I'll kill you. Zhang Yi. I'm gonna get you. That the only response was the upbeat pop song blasting from inside the apartment, asterisk only after loving star dot asterisk how deep is love, star dot asterisk only after losing star dot asterisk what to cherish, star outside, a chorus of shouts and curses. Inside, the cheerful music felt like a taunt and it was, his arm a little sore from firing dozens of crossbow bolts. Zhang Yi went to the kitchen, grabbed a Coke from the refrigerator, and chugged it down. Ah! Refreshing, that he glanced at the monitor, watching their every move, seeing that Zhang Yi's door was unbreachable, the neighbors felt a surge of anxiety and desperation. What do we do? Sun Jichao shouted, everyone, don't panic. I've got an idea. That he limped forward, clutching his injured leg, he pointed to the wall of Zhang Yi's apartment, a nasty grin on his face. We can't break down the door, it's made of alloy. But this wall? It's just bricks and cement, right? I don't believe we can't smash through it. A glimmer of hope sparked in their eyes. Yeah. Why didn't we think of that? We can't break down the door, but we can smash the wall. With all of us working together, we can smash this wall in no time. Heh, Zhang Yi, you jerk. You never saw this coming. Inside his apartment, Zhang Yi saw the neighbors suddenly cheering and raised his eyebrows. The music was too loud to hear what they were saying. He wasn't worried. He'd wait and see, he wasn't afraid of their tricks. He had plenty of his own. He'd spent a month fortifying his place, turning it into an indestructible fortress. If they could break through it easily, he might as well just give up. The neighbors gathered tools, they lined up against the outer wall of Zhang Yi's apartment, swinging hammers and axes, ready to smash their way through. Boom! A big guy swung a sledgehammer with all his might, slamming it against the wall. A crack appeared, and chunks of plaster fell away. Excitement flared in their eyes. They'd found a way in. They swung harder, but the next time the sledgehammer struck, it rang against something hard. Ping, star, the big guy screamed, dropping the hammer with a crash. He stumbled backward, clutching his hands. They were split open, blood flowing freely. It quickly solidified in the freezing temperature, creating a gruesome sight. What's going on? They were confused. What kind of wall could withstand a sledgehammer? Someone reached out and brushed away the plaster dust. What they saw behind it made their jaw drop. The walls made of steel. Everyone gasped and crowded closer to see. Sure enough, beneath the plaster, thick, black metal was revealed. It was the same material as the door. One person cried out, how can this be? Who builds walls out of steel? I don't believe the whole place is made of iron. Despair set in, and others grabbed hammers, hitting other parts of the wall. Working together, they tried to find a weak spot, but everywhere they struck, they found solid, thick steel. In the living room, Zhang Yi smirked. You think you're clever, but you can't think of anything I didn't consider from the start. Sorry, but even the walls of my apartment are made of 20 centimeters stainless steel. Cannonballs couldn't break through this. I'm not worried about your hammers and axes. Zhang Yi's biggest fear was death, so he'd addressed every problem he could think of. During construction, he'd personally checked every inch, hitting it with a hammer to make sure it was secure. The memory of his previous life, when someone had broken into his home, haunted him. He refused to let it happen again. The pounding outside continued. Zhang Yi found it annoying and turned on the apartment's noise reduction feature. This would prevent anyone from using noise as an attack. After about 20 minutes, the sound died down completely. The residents stared blankly at the metal wall, their hearts colder than the snow outside. It was a cruel wall, cutting them off from the hope of getting supplies. How could this happen? Why would anyone build a house like this? Someone covered their face, sobbing. Zhang Yi's neighbors, the young couple, said sadly, we knew they were renovating, but we never expected this. No normal person would build a house like that. Sun Jichao, Zhou Peng, and Gu Jiaoyang had bloodshot eyes. If they couldn't break into Zhang Yi's apartment today, they would all die. Sun Jichao bit his lip so hard he didn't notice it bleeding. Zhang Yi knew there was going to be a snowstorm. Everything he did was to keep us out. He pointed at Zhang Yi's apartment, shouting angrily, the neighbors looked at him, weeping and cursing Zhang Yi in pain. That bastard Zhang Yi only cares about himself. He doesn't care about any of us. What's the point of living alone if we all die? Won't you be lonely if you're the only one left in the world? One day, you'll regret it, Zhang Yi. You'll be eaten up by guilt for not warning us or helping us. How will you sleep at night? Don't you feel guilty, that seeing that they couldn't get to Zhang Yi, some started trying to comfort themselves. Humph, God will punish you, Zhang Yi. If we die because of you, you'll have a guilty conscience and live a miserable life. That they had no idea how happy Zhang Yi was in his apartment. Why should he care about strangers? Chen Zhenghao had been watching, gun in hand, seeing the metal walls. He recognized how difficult the situation was. He wasn't interested in anyone else. He just wanted Zhang Yi's apartment. What are you getting worked up about? This is just the beginning. So the walls are made of iron. What about the ceiling? The floor? I don't believe he lives in a tin can. Zhang Yi heard Chen Zhenghao through the surveillance and nodded approvingly. That bastard's pretty sharp. Then he sighed, shaking his head. Too bad for him, I'm not an idiot. Inspired by Chen Zhenghao's words, the neighbors ran upstairs and downstairs from Zhang Yi's apartment. They used hammers, axes, chisels, and sticks, throwing everything they had at the walls. They were only 20 centimeters away from a chance at survival. Their goal was to get through those 20 centimeters. But soon, they fell into even deeper despair. Zhang Yi's apartment really was an iron box. Up and down, left and right, every angle was sealed with thick iron plates. Without power, there were no chainsaws or power drills. They could chisel for a year without food or water and still not break through the walls. Chapter 58 Despair. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chen Zhenghao and the others swarmed Zhang Yi's house, tearing into the walls all morning. But after ripping out the wallboard, flooring, and ceiling, they hit a brick wall. Thick steel plates. A 20-centimeter steel plate was a nightmare. With just manpower, there was no way they could break through. Working in ultra-low temperatures, unable to replenish their energy, they were just hastening their own deaths. Many collapsed from exhaustion. Their stomachs growled. They clutched their shrunken bellies, hunger gnawing at them. Their food supply was dwindling. Some glanced at their neighbors, catching glimpses of pale flesh through gaps in their clothes. A horrifying thought flickered in their minds. Isn't that meat? The chilling idea sent shivers down their spines, and they desperately tried to banish it. But once the seed was planted, it offered a desperate solution. They all knew, deep down, that cannibalism was a real possibility. Is there really no other way? Sun Jichao's face was etched with pain. He could feel his arms starting to fester. Without antibiotics, not even basic pain relievers, and no way to clean the wound properly. The rust in the wound meant death was almost certain. Damn Zhang Yi. Why is he so cruel? How can he live like this while the rest of us suffer? What's wrong with sacrificing himself? What's wrong with that? Sun Jichao screamed at the sky, his heart twisted by despair. Just then, Zhang Yi's neighbor emerged. Hey, you guys could try the balcony. When they renovated, they put in floor-to-ceiling windows. Mostly glass. Maybe you can break in that way. The other residents couldn't see the back of Zhang Yi's house, but this neighbor could. In building 25, some apartments had balconies, and Zhang Yi's 24th floor unit had a small one. He used it to grow flowers and dry laundry. Hearing this, the desperate group looked up. Windows? Yes. If there are windows, there have to be exits. He couldn't have sealed them all. As long as there's a window, we can get in. They barged into the apartment next to Zhang Yi's without a word. There was a gap of about 6 inches between the balconies, with a fence in between, but nothing could stop these crazed people now. Still, the outside of the balcony wasn't the same as the hallway. The corridors had been sealed off by everyone, keeping some heat inside. Outside, the wind howled, snow fell, and exposure could kill in hours. Chen Zhenghao and the others didn't care. If they could just get into Zhang Yi's house, they could have it all. Screaming, they leaped onto Zhang Yi's balcony like madmen. Zhang Yi, of course, noticed the commotion. The two sides locked eyes for a split second. The neighbors raised their tools and began smashing the huge French windows. Zhang Yi calmly dragged his white recliner to the window, settled in, and poured himself a steaming cup of coffee. The small balcony was soon packed with people. Their faces were pale, like the living dead, their expressions twisted and manic. They hardly looked human, if there were zombies, Zhang Yi thought, they'd probably look like this. Bang! 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 Clang! The impacts reverberated against the glass, braving the wind and snow. These lunatics desperately tried to break through. Even when they smashed their hands, they felt no pain, letting the blood flow and freeze. When they were hacking at the wall, the urge wasn't as strong, but now, with only a sheet of glass separating them, they could see clearly how lavishly Zhang Yi was living. The fireplace roared, and Zhang Yi, in just a light shirt, lounged on a white recliner like a king. A cup of coffee, still steaming, sat in his hand. Looked like a cappuccino. There were weapons on the side table, but that was beside the point. What really mattered was what sat under the coffee table, a pile of half-eaten snacks, potato chips, burgers, cola, pizza, roast chicken, roast duck, even fried noodles. These treats drove the neighbors on the balcony completely insane. After only 2 weeks without them, they were acting as if they'd found long-lost relatives. Roar! Aya! They were beyond words, screaming and howling in a desperate attempt to express their frenzy. They slammed into the window with renewed force, holding his coffee. Zhang Yi enjoyed the show, he said softly. Who says glass is weaker than metal? This wall was top of the line. For his own comfort, Zhang Yi ignored Zhanlong Security's recommendation and didn't use metal here. Instead, he splurged on custom-made bulletproof floor-to-ceiling windows. He remembered Wu Huiran, the manager of Zhanlong Security, saying, with walls this thick, you're not stopping bullets, you're stopping shells. The bulletproof glass on western heads of state special vehicles was made of the same stuff. But Zhang Yi's glass was more than twice as thick. Eventually, the crowd realized something was wrong. They'd thought it was plexiglass, something they could smash through quickly, but after a dozen people hammered away for what felt like forever, not even a crack appeared. What kind of glass is this? Is it bulletproof glass? What? Bulletproof glass? The words rasped from a man with glasses, filled with a despair that seemed to come from the depths of hell. If it could stop bullets, how could they break it with their bare hands? No. I don't believe it. A young man roared, I control my own fate. I refuse to believe I can't break this. If I break it, the fireplace, the food, the drink, it'll all be mine. I have to break it. Aya. Probably the bitter cold, combined with the wild swings between hope and despair, had frozen their brains. They abandoned all reason, working madly and recklessly, fighting for a chance at survival. Zhang Yi applauded, impressed by their dedication, but he was starting to get hungry. He pulled out some food from his space, braised pork knuckle, banana bread, and some pure cocoa butter chocolate. Chapter 59. Smash it hard, did you not eat? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Only a single row of windows stood between Zhang Yi and the desperate crowd outside, their faces contorted as they hammered at the glass, fighting against the icy wind and snow. Inside, Zhang Yi relaxed on a deck chair, enjoying a feast. The contrast was enough to drive the neighbors wild with envy. Their voices, raw with frustration, rose in curses, their eyes bloodshot. Zhang Yi, you just wait, I'm gonna kill you. Once I break through this glass, you're done, you selfish bastard, you piece of scum. Your little party won't last long. Today's the day you die. All that food, that coffee, it's gonna be mine, all mine. Hearing them, Zhang Yi raised his coffee cup in a mocking salute. Come on, keep trying. But soon, the crowd was running out of steam. They were on the 24th floor, exposed to a fierce wind and heavy snowfall, and their body temperatures were plummeting. They had to rotate teams every 10 minutes, yet, after half an hour, the glass only had a few scratches. Despair settled in their hearts. Still, seeing Zhang Yi living in comfort on the other side of the glass, their jealousy wouldn't let them give up. Another half hour passed, and they kept at it. Zhang Yi Noticed several thugs from Chen Zhenghao's gang among the crowd. Obviously, Chen Zhenghao wasn't going to sit this out. Zhang Yi decided it was time to act. He got up from the recliner, walked over to the coffee table, and picked up a bottle. The frost-covered glass initially hid what Zhang Yi was holding, making the neighbors think it was just a drink. Then, they saw him pull out a lighter and ignite something. Suddenly, a small panel above them opened, and a ball of fire was hurled out. Zhang Yi had installed concealed firing ports in his walls as a means of defense. The bottle sailed through the air in a fiery arc and crashed to the ground before their astonished eyes. Smash! A sharp sound, then a roaring explosion of flames. It was one of Zhang Yi's homemade Molotov cocktails. Even in sub-zero temperatures, gasoline burns hot. The burning gasoline splashed everywhere, instantly engulfing the balcony. Packed together in the limited space, the dozen or so people found their down jackets and cotton pants soaked in gasoline, and they erupted into flames. A playful smile flickered on Zhang Yi's lips as he lit another Molotov cocktail and tossed it outside. Fire! Fire! The people were packed together, and separated by a balcony barrier. Jumping to the neighboring balcony wasn't easy. They were trapped, their bodies consumed by the flames. Zhang Yi watched as they turned into writhing fireballs. Some tried to roll on the ground, hoping the snow would extinguish the flames, but it was useless. Gasoline burns even in water. Others desperately tried to climb to the next balcony, but in their panic, they lost their grip and plummeted from the 24th floor. A long scream ended with a sickening thud. Falling from that height, even the snow wouldn't cushion the impact. Even if they weren't dead, their bones would be shattered, their organs ruptured. As good as dead, Zhang Yi chuckled. At least falling to your death is better than burning. Bang! A charred face suddenly pressed against the glass, twisted in terror, glaring at Zhang Yi. Help me! Save me! In agony, he begged Zhang Yi for help. Zhang Yi raised his coffee cup in a mocking toast. I'll save you, my ass. Go to hell, trash! The man let out a final, desperate cry and was completely consumed by the fire. On the next balcony, 6 guys waiting for their turn watched the horrific scene unfold, their faces paling in terror. Help us! Help me! I don't want to die, please. One of the burning men, desperate, tried to climb over, grabbing the railing with both hands. Without hesitation, one of the guys on the neighboring balcony kicked his hands hard. Get out of here! You're done for, don't drag us down with you. He kicked, but the burning man wouldn't let go. He gritted his teeth, fighting for his life, as the kicking continued. Finally, his fingers were broken off. The man struggled for a moment, then looked at them with despair and slowly slid down the railing. The air reeked of burnt meat. It didn't take long for the dozen or so people to die. Some hadn't been badly burned at first and tried to escape, but the neighbors stopped them. Afraid of the flames spreading, they chose to let them die. Others, overwhelmed by the pain, simply jumped from the 24th floor. The fat in their bodies fueled the raging fire, ironically bringing them a long-lost warmth. Silently, people stepped forward, extending their hands to soak up the heat, a furtive smile creeping across their faces. The flames burned for 20 minutes before finally dying out. The neighbors stared at the charred corpses, fear gripping their hearts. In their attempt to get to Zhang Yi, they'd already lost 30 or 40 people. There was no way to break down the door. How were they going to take the supplies from Zhang Yi? Sniff. A young man who hadn't eaten in 2 days sniffed the air. The smell of burning fat was strangely appetizing, reminding him of his favorite all-you-can-eat barbecue. He couldn't help but glance at the charred remains scattered on the balcony. Unbidden, he swallowed hard. Around him, others followed suit. On everyone's gaunt, numb faces, he saw the unmistakable desire to eat, but, with so many people present, the last vestiges of their moral compass held them back. If they were alone, they might actually resort to cannibalism. Suddenly, a woman burst into tears. I can't take it anymore. After a full day of effort, everyone thought they could easily break into Zhang Yi's home, but the end result made them desperate. With so many people dead, not even a crack had appeared on the walls and floor-to-ceiling windows of Zhang Yi's house. She suddenly ran to the edge of the balcony facing Zhang Yi's, and with a loud thump, knelt down in front of the glass. Zhang Yi, I'm starving to death. Please help me. Just give me a piece of bread. Others rushed forward, kneeling beside her, begging Zhang Yi for a bite of food, weeping uncontrollably. The scene was heart-wrenching. Most of those kneeling were women, hoping to appeal to Zhang Yi's sympathy. Chapter 60. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Continuous wailing and desperate pleas rose from outside the window. The neighbors were banging their heads on the ground until they bled, a truly wretched sight. Zhang Yi sighed and walked to the window. Hey, come on, guys, this is making me uncomfortable. He held up the steaming bowl of noodles. And when I'm uncomfortable, I gotta eat. Slurp. Zhang Yi noisily slurped down a mouthful of noodles. The sound alone made his neighbors' mouths water. They were practically drooling with envy. The wails intensified, and they kowtowed even harder. Zhang Yi, we were wrong. We just want to live. Just give us some food. We'll live like dogs for you. We'll do whatever you want in the future. Just say the word. Zhang Yi ignored them, focusing on his noodles. What a blessing to be able to scarf down a bowl of noodles when you're starving. After polishing off half the bowl, he casually placed the leftovers in front of the glass door, right in front of the neighbors. They were separated by nothing but the glass, able to see, but not to eat. They pressed their faces against the glass like dogs, as if they could somehow absorb the noodles through sheer willpower. Don't say I never gave you a chance. Whoever brings me Chen Zhenghao's head, I'll feed them noodles like this for a week. They'll be stuffed after every meal. Zhang Yi had no pity for these people, but their constant attempts to break down his walls and windows were getting on his nerves. Better to let them turn on each other, a real dog-eat-dog scenario. That was where the entertainment lay. As he spoke, Zhang Yi sent the same message to the building's group chat. The neighbors in front of the window looked hesitant. Chen Zhenghao had a gun. Going after his head might cost them their own, but then again, if they couldn't handle Chen Zhenghao, did they really think they could take on Zhang Yi? There were 30 or 40 bodies surrounding Zhang Yi's apartment, a testament to his strength. It was clear Zhang Yi was a much tougher nut to crack than Chen Zhenghao. Meanwhile, from the next balcony over, Chen Zhenghao was observing the situation. He hadn't heard Zhang Yi's offer, but he was frowning, trying to figure out his next move. He'd lost 2 of his men this time. If he wanted to maintain control of the building, he needed to replenish his forces. Lost in thought, Chen Zhenghao suddenly felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, making his hair stand on end. He whirled around, gun raised, only to find everyone staring at him strangely. What do you want? Seeing the gun, the crowd backed away, fear flickering in their eyes. Get out of here, Chen Zhenghao roared, but they continued to stare at him, their gaze unsettling, almost predatory, not like they were looking at a person, but like they were looking at a meal. Terrified, Chen Zhenghao retreated with his remaining men. Wait, what about Zhang Yi's place? Sun Jichao asked. Chen Zhenghao exploded. Screw it. You couldn't even break through. What else is there to do? We'll figure something out later. He cursed and stormed off. In front of Zhang Yi's windows, the kowtowing beggars and would-be invaders alike finally succumbed to the biting wind and snow and dispersed. Zhang Yi, cozy inside his warm apartment, settled in to watch the show. After all, this little episode had culled the building's population by 40 or so, and almost everyone had participated in the attempted invasion, leaving them weak and exhausted. Resources were even scarcer now, and the infighting was only going to get worse. Soon, Zhang Yi's inbox was flooded with private messages. After this battle, the neighbors had finally accepted their defeat. They were too weak to launch another large-scale attack on Zhang Yi's home, and facing Zhang Yi's impenetrable defenses, they'd given up. Now, many were begging for mercy or offering to trade for supplies. Rich kid Su Hao, for example, he sent a nude photo shoot of his girlfriend, saying, Zhang Yi, you can have my girl. I just need something to eat, anything. She's a famous model in Tianhai. Look at those headlights, that rear end, those legs. You could play with her for a year. Zhang Yi recognized the model. Su Hao had bought an apartment here just to be close to her. She was always dressed provocatively, a regular vixen, radiating temptation. In the past, she wouldn't have given the average guy the time of day. She always looked down on Zhang Yi, but now, Su Hao was willing to sell her for a few meals, and the woman looked gaunt, but surprisingly eager to be traded. At least she knew Zhang Yi had food, so she put on a good show for the camera. What a skank, Zhang Yi muttered. He had to admit, the model had a killer body, like a luxury car, probably a blast to drive, but there was no way Zhang Yi was letting such a shameless woman into his home. She'd probably stab him in his sleep and take over his apartment. A woman who'd sell her body for food had no moral compass. Zhang Yi disdainfully watched her video 5 times, then closed the chat window with a sneer. There were other messages too. Fewer men contacted him. They didn't have anything to offer Zhang Yi. Only Uncle Yu cheerfully congratulated Zhang Yi on fending off the attack, but plenty of women were trying to get in touch. Fang Yuqing, for example, wrote excitedly, "Brother Zhang Yi, you're amazing. I knew you'd be okay. I can't get out right now, they're so awful, they've got me locked up. Don't worry, I'll find a way to get to you." Zhang Yi snorted and ignored her. Zhou sent a polite message of congratulations, but Zhang Yi knew that was just her way. Dusk was approaching, and it was already getting dark around 5 p.m. The days were short, the nights long. On TV, the few remaining official stations were still broadcasting. Thanks to the strong support of the government, the snowstorm situation in our country has been effectively alleviated. Everything is moving in a stable and positive direction. According to statistics, the death toll due to the snowstorm in Tianhai City yesterday was 1. Zhang Yi found the news more entertaining than the comedy shows, but he was also curious, where had these TV stations relocated to? And how were they still operating? While listening to the nonsensical news, Zhang Yi scrolled through his messages. He found it amusing to read the insults, pleas, and begging from his neighbors. Those who were hurling abuse usually had someone dead at home. Zhang Yi, feeling generous, would send them his blessings. Congratulations to those of you who have lost a loved one. You can barbecue them for the funeral, and mix the ashes with your rice. After all, more than a dozen people had been burned to death, saving them the trouble of cooking. Zhang Yi teased them, making them even angrier. But suddenly, he noticed movement on the balcony. Curious, Zhang Yi went to the window. The heavy snow reflected the light, making it unusually bright outside. He saw people stealthily carrying away the corpses, or, to be precise, the charred remains. These individuals were bundled up tightly. When they saw Zhang Yi watching them, they jumped. "Zhang Yi, we're not here to cause trouble, don't get the wrong idea. We're just taking away the bodies." Their voices were shaky, and they avoided Zhang Yi's gaze, clearly ashamed. Zhang Yi's lips curled into a smile. "Oh. Removing the bodies? Are you their families? If you're burying them, just toss them down. You're not planning on building a gravesite at home, are you?" That they were stumped. "Well. You don't need the bodies, so just leave us alone." They nervously dragged the corpse away. Zhang Yi waved at the window. "Enjoy your meal."